feel free to chime in and let us know. But from here on, this is going to be known as the Slate now instead of the Dynasty podcast. So you're in the right place if you're looking for that show. It is going to be a little bit more DFS geared. I am your host, Jeff DiMatteo. With me, as always, is fantasy football analyst for GridironRatings.com, Kyle Carroll. Kyle, how are you?
Doing fantastic. Was off Friday, so I got a nice little 3-day weekend to hang out with the baby. And it's just great. Football preseason is a little more exciting this year than I remember it being. maybe I just like Tua looking pretty good yesterday. I'm a bit of a Tua fan. I really hope he has a bounce back year, and he looked pretty sharp yesterday.
Yeah, he did look really good, and I think Zach Wilson and some of these other young quarterbacks have looked really good. I'm going to apologize in advance for a screaming child that might be coming down right now. I don't know what happened. I heard some things. He's yelling. He's not happy. So the family's home today. Usually they sneak out while I'm on the show. But here he comes. Come on, buddy. It's okay. Come on. You want to come sit with Daddy? Come on, mister. Sorry, everybody. It's never a dull moment when you're on a live show. So
yeah, that's what makes it exciting.
Sure does. I'm going to mute my mic for just a moment here.
Yeah, no problem. I'll kind of get this going here and keep introducing the show. So today we're going to talk about some our sponsorship that we have with Thrive Fantasy. I'll let Jeff kind of expand on that a little bit once he gets settled in. But we're super excited. If you haven't had the opportunity, you can download the Thrive Fantasy app, and we'll have a promo code for you guys, and they'll help match some money for your first deposit. Basically, Thrive, what they do is they do prop bets. So prop bets, we can look at an example that we're going to be talking about today. Christian McCaffrey, week 1 versus the Jets. His prop bet is a 71.5 over-under on rushing. And you choose your over-under, and depending on the probability of that hitting, you get points. And so if you look at what we have here, for example, Christian McCaffrey over 71.5 rushing yards, that would be 110 points. If you took the under, it would be 90 points, meaning that Vegas or whoever makes the odds believes that Christian McCaffrey is going to be under 71.5 rushing yards. They give you 20 prop bets, and you choose your 10 favorites. And at the end of the contest, whoever has the most points wins the contest. So what we're going to be talking about today, and one that I'm in, is a $20 buy-in, $100,000 guaranteed. And I believe first place is, let me look at it right here. First place is $20,000. So if you love prop bets and if you love doing daily fantasy, this is a great app. And I'll let Jeff introduce the promo code if you got it going.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I'm juggling the little fella here. This is Tucker. He's very excited to be here. He's 2. So where we're at right now with Thrive is that they are going to do a full match of, I believe it's up to $100 on the buy-in or on the first deposit. The promo code for that is going to be GR2021. So Gridiron Ratings, obviously, GR2021. And they'll go ahead and match your first deposit, which will be fantastic. The great thing about Thrive is that it's not like DraftKings and FanDuel in the sense that you've got all the sharks already swimming in the pool, right? So it gives you a chance to go in there, play some of the props, and it gives you a better chance to win, frankly. I dipped my toe in the water with a little bit of, esports and some other weird stuff that I wasn't even really all that familiar with. And I felt like it was pretty easy to actually break even and even come out on top and stuff I didn't even really know about. So my thought is with football, we should be able to do pretty well, especially with some of the projection models and things we're able to do. So pretty excited about the partnership. We're going to have some stuff on the site shortly in terms of advertisement and things of the sort. So you'll see more of the promo code and more of Thrive on our site and then some of our content and some of our tweets. So we are looking forward to getting that out there for you.
Yeah. Hey, what was that promo code one more time for me?
GR2021.
Sweet. So you got any, we had some fantasy football we had some preseason action yesterday. Did you take away anything from playing time? I know for me, I was kind of like overreactionary, not part of it, but kind of was watching it, the Malcolm Brown experience last week, right? Where he kind of was the first man up. Myles Gaskin, they went crazy on Twitter. Myles Gaskin was not getting the touches. He was not out with the first team. And then yesterday, Myles Gaskin had all the touches. Malcolm Brown was not on the field for like the majority of the first 2 snaps. And Myles Gaskin got 2 touchdowns. So what are you kind of reading into this? Do you think they're just kind of playing it like the Saints quarterback where you give one starter 1 week, another starter another week? Do you think this is something we're going to see more of? Like, what is your takeaway from that?
My first takeaway is that everyone's reading entirely too much into the preseason. Okay, the preseason is they're fake games. Okay, these are exhibition games that do not have any real bearing on the actual NFL games when week 1 starts. So a lot of these guys are getting reps and snaps just to see if they're worth a roster spot. You have to get something on tape. A guy like Malcolm Brown, he's been a backup forever. He just doesn't have a lot on tape. Myles Gaskin, the Dolphins know what he is. Just because he wasn't running with the ones doesn't mean anything. We have 3 preseason games now instead of 4. So the traditional rhythms of how players play and how they get their snaps in the preseason has changed. The collective bargaining agreement, the way these guys practice, has changed. Everything's different now. So we're going to need a year or two to really understand exactly who's going to be playing where, because my understanding is that Myles Gaskin isn't going anywhere. Brian Flores has talked about wanting to do this committee, riding the hot hand, yada, yada, yada. He's giving you all the Bill Belichick, nonsense. He doesn't want to give you anything. He's not going to tell you how to beat him. Well, yeah, Myles Gaskin's our guy. Cool. So teams prepare for Myles Gaskin. That's not what he's doing. He's going to sit there and tell you, we're going to ride the hot hand, blah, blah, blah. He's going to make you think about 4 running backs instead of 1. And that's the idea. And then put those guys on film. He knows Myles Gaskin can play. Saw him play last year. We saw him in the regular season. That's the production that matters. So at the end of the day, Gaskin will be fine. People are fading him in drafts. His ADP is plummeting already over the last, 6-7 days here. He's okay to draft. I still prefer him as kind of a low-end RB2, high-end RB3, just because there will be some rotation. But I also think this Dolphins offense is going to be a little bit more dynamic. I think they're going to spread you out a little bit more and want to throw it down the field. Jalen Waddle, I think, is going to be a bigger impact in this offense than people realize. And when you get Will Fuller back, you're going to have 2 guys that can really stretch the field out. And so it'll be interesting to see how it goes, but I don't love him as like a high-end back. But don't just fade him completely at this point.
Yeah, I agree. He's in that Darrell Henderson, Chase Edmonds range of running backs you don't trust, but are probably going to overperform their ADP at some point. I'm excited to talk about Jalen Waddle. We'll talk about him a little later, but as of right now, Will Fuller has not been practicing the last few weeks, and he's going to miss week 1. I know I feel like we've been spoiled the last few years on rookie wide receivers, and I would not, but I'm taking my shot on Jalen Waddle. Like, something about it just feels right. Coming into the draft, I personally had him behind, Devonta Smith and Terrace Marshall and obviously Jamar Chase. But I've been impressed, man. The guy, I think, has a real opportunity, and it also helps that I believe in Tua as well, taking a step forward and being an accurate quarterback. He has some opportunity to pop early.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely something to that. But yeah, I just can't wait for week 1 to get here.
Gosh,
I think
I'm tired of talking about preseason.
Yeah, it's hard of reading tea leaves. I run projections. When did we run through the first run of projections? In May, June?
It feels like forever ago, but
it feels like forever ago. Will Fuller is going to be fine. Doesn't matter that he's not playing. Jalen Waddle is going to be great. This Dolphins offense is going to be fine. Everyone that's been down on Tua, you need to remember 2 years ago, teams were tanking for Tua. I think everyone's suddenly forgotten that. He didn't suddenly forget how to play football. He had a serious hip injury. It takes a year to come back. And everyone consistently in the medical community said that. And so he looks really good now. And I think he'll surprise a lot of people when he comes out and he starts whipping the ball all over the field. And people are like, well, wait a minute. Why is Tua low-end QB1, high-end QB2 right now? What's happening here? Why are the Dolphins 4-1? Like, what's going on here? And it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody.
Yeah, I think good coaching comes a long way. And I think we can all Chan Gailey was an experiment that maybe they shouldn't have went the direction to last year. Obviously with, that he's no longer with the team, but I think overall that coaching staff is very solid. And you got to remember, like, when you're focused on rehab 24/7, like Tua was off a major injury, and he mentioned that he wasn't really locked into the playbook last year, like, that's going to have an effect on the field. So now that he's healthy and he can focus more on his teammates in the playbook, I think he's going to be fine.
Right. Same here. So how about Rashad Bateman cleared to run routes? Are we feeling good about this guy for redraft, or are we going to stick with?
I like it. It's one of those situations where I like it more for the quarterback than I do for the actual player. I think it's going to take him a few weeks to really get acclimated. I still think as of right now, it's Mark Andrews or nothing for me. So, but I like it better for Lamar.
Don't sleep on Sammy Watkins. We got Locke versus Bridgewater. So we're talking about DFS ramifications, redraft dynasty ramifications, the whole bit. I keep getting this feeling that Bridgewater's winning the contest, but they still want Locke to have the job.
Yeah, and as a Broncos fan, I've been trying to pay a little extra attention to it. I didn't get to watch everything yesterday, but Bridgewater, it feels weird because Bridgewater played really well if you look at just the stats yesterday, but they were a lot more aggressive with him on fourth down yesterday than they were with Drew Lock. Mm-hmm. And so the stats do look like they swing Teddy Bridgewater's way, and I think he has been playing better, but I think they view Lock with a higher ceiling, and obviously they have the younger player and the draft capital invested in him. Not this regime, but it's still there with the team. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think Bridgewater is probably the better, safer quarterback for this team, especially for how decent we expect this defense to be. But I think they're going to roll with Locke because Locke hasn't imploded, right? If Locke imploded at some point this preseason, I think we'd be like, oh, it's Bridgewater, no doubt. But Locke has played decent. He's kept up with Bridgewater. So they're going to go with the younger player. I think that's just how it's going to go.
And Locke's looked really good against twos.
Yeah.
Sorry, not much of a Locke fan.
He had those 9 passes against the ones in week 1 of the preseason. Again, we don't know how much of the first team defense is playing, but he looked good for that first 2 series.
To say it was against ones would be a stretch because only half the starters were playing. So it was really against twos. I don't put a lot of faith in Drew Lock. I feel like he doesn't have it between the ears. This is going to end up being Bridgewater's team before the year's over.
Agreed.
And then you can adjust your ranks as you might, but Jerry Jeudy will still be an incredible value at his ADP. Cortland Sutton's probably going to be a little overdrafted. Noah Fant will be a guy I think people will like quite a bit. But let's get off Denver. We talked about Thrive a little bit already. How about we jump into some of that? Why don't we talk about some of the over-unders and some of these players and see if we can find some picks that we like, and maybe we can get some folks to sign up for Thrive using that GR2021 promo code and help some folks win some money.
Yeah. And so, like I said, when you go to Thrive and you look at, there's some different pools, right? You can do, like in DraftKings, you can do the head-to-head versus another player, or you can do the big player pools. And, I'm here to try to win some money. So I'm going to go for the big player pools and try to see if I can win one of those tournaments. Like I mentioned before, there's 20 prop bets available, and you have to choose 10. So it makes you choose 10, and then it has 2 ice picks, which stands for in case of emergency. So if a player gets hurt or something happens that would nullify the contest, you just have that backup just in case it needs to be put in there. We've talked about this a little before the show, and so I feel like we're pretty much on the same page of some of these that we feel pretty good about. I think one thing I saw that you chose the under on was Christian McCaffrey in his 71.5 rushing yards. I may have missaw that, but let me get what's your take on Christian McCaffrey 71.5 rushing yards versus the New York Jets in week 1?
I have this just sneaking suspicion that this game's going to end up scoring more points than people realize, and it's going to turn into less rushing for the Panthers and more throwing. And so this matchup doesn't entice me. This isn't a prop I'm probably going to play because you're only getting 110 if you take the over and you're getting 90 if you take the under. So the differential is really low. I kind of want to take the ones where I'm getting the high point values, and I want to take those contrarian plays. That's why I kind of felt like this might be a little contrarian because people are going to see, the Jets, and they're going to say, Lawson's out, and Jared Davis is now out, and the Jets defense isn't very good. But what they're failing to realize is that defense isn't very good, and the Panthers are going to position Sam Darnold in that kind of revenge narrative to go put up a game. So I wouldn't be surprised if McCaffrey came out and caught 8 balls for 105 yards and then ran for 65. And had one of those games, right, where he's killer for fantasy, right, and he's the guy, but he's just not doing it on the ground. And so that's where I stuck with the under on this. I wouldn't say I'm doing it with a high level of comfort, but I'm willing to play it to be contrarian because I think the field is really going to look at this and say, the Jets smashed the over.
Yeah, I kind of went opposite, with you. I took the over on this, and it is mostly because when I was looking at last year, there was a few games where Christian McCaffrey didn't have the high volume targets. Now, obviously, that's probably not a good game plan if you're a head coach for the Panthers and you have Christian McCaffrey back there. But I think there was 1 or 2 games last year where he had under 5 targets. I'll have to vet that here in a second. So I'm hoping that they utilize him pretty well on the ground. Like I said, the Jets defense is a little banged up. It really just depends on if this Panthers defense has turned it around, right? Because the last 2 years, they have been the worst run defense. I mean, last year, Josh Jacobs tore them up in week 1. Josh Jacobs and Christian McCaffrey were like the top dogs in week 1 last year. So you have to what if you have Tevin Coleman and Johnson and P. Ryan and all these, plethora of running backs that just absolutely tear up the Panthers. But if the Panthers turn it around and they're able to control the clock a little bit better, yeah, maybe they're able to do that. So I just kind of, like I said, it's pretty close. 71.5 rushing yards is pretty close for me.
It's you got to remember that defense was really young last year. They started 4 rookies last year. So week 1 starting 4 rookies. Yeah, they were never going to be good, especially against last year's Raiders O-line. Featured some of the best linemen in football, like guys like Kelechi Osemele was pretty good. We talked about him week 1 last year. Yeah, guys like Rodney Hudson, who's now in Arizona. He's a rock star. Yet Richie Incognito was still playing really well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you had a veteran O-line riddled with dudes that were Pro Bowlers and all pros blowing up a bunch of rookies. The Panthers' emergence in the back half of last season, and then you continue to add weapons like Hassan Reddick in that defense. This isn't the same group we saw last year. I fully expect them to control the line of scrimmage short of where Mekhi Becton stands and go ahead and be able to manage the Jets front. What I'm more worried about is how Christian McCaffrey is going to get his touches, because if this turns into a track meet, he's not getting them between the tackles. Yeah. And so if Zach Wilson keeps doing what Zach Wilson's been doing, which has been finding wide open receivers all over the field and throwing for an crazy high accuracy clip, then you're going to find yourself in a spot where this is going to be a 35-28 ball game. McCaffrey's not running the ball a whole lot because they have to throw to keep up. So that's where I think the receiving is there, the rushing maybe not. But again, I think I'm being contrarian on this play because, like, to your point, you took the over, and I think that's going to be pretty consistent. I think a lot of folks are going to do that.
Yeah, well, and that's really what could, win or lose you a lot of money right here, because the props have it favored for the under. And you look at Christian McCaffrey, 7.5 rushing yards. That feels like a smash over, especially if you're getting 110 points to take the over. Yep. It feels like a trap, but I'm just going to let it trap me. I think that's just going to be one of those situations where it feels right, but I totally understand the opposite side, because 71.5, that is a very sneaky over-under prop.
I would look really hard at if you're going to take, let's just say you're going to take the overs and you want to try and chase down those points. The prop I'd actually be looking at is DeAndre Hopkins 0.5 receiving touchdowns. You get $110 if he scores a touchdown week 1. Yeah. You get 90 if he doesn't, so I'm going to take the 110 points on this one on the 1 touchdown.
Yeah, and that's something we're going to talk about a little bit later, is you kind of have to dissect, like, what is the path for this game, right? And Vegas odds have DeAndre Hopkins and this Cardinals-Tennessee game at, I believe, a 50-point over-under. I mean, they have they're a top 4 over-under team for the weeks out of the 13 games that are lined up for Sunday. And so Vegas expects a high-scoring game. I think they'll be close. I think they might hit the under on this, but even if they hit the under and they score 48 points, that's a lot of points to put up, and there's going to be a lot of touchdowns here in this game, and I think DeAndre Hopkins is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. So
if the Cardinals scored 3 touchdowns offensively, how many of those are DeAndre Hopkins? At least one?
I think at least you have to, at least one. At least the probability is over 50% that it's at least one. And for 110 points, I mean, when you're trying to hit these and accumulate these points, that's what you need, right? That's the difference maker. And so, yeah, it's kind of the same thing with another guy like Tyreek Hill that we've talked about. 0.5 touchdowns, and he's just got a flat 100 points for the over, 100 points for the under. He's not a huge red zone guy because they do a lot of things with Travis Kelce and those shovel passes down at the goal line. But it's the highest over under of the week, I believe, at 53.5. I think is what it's at for 53.5 as of this morning for the over under versus the Cleveland Browns. I mean, 3 touchdowns for Kansas City. How many of those goes to Tyreek Hill? Probably over 50% chance that Tyreek Hill gets one of them. So
I'm not going to play that prop because that one is one of those ones where I feel like a lot of people are going to play because they're going to feel one way or another about it really, really heavily. I don't have a hard feeling on it. I wonder about having Denzel Ward out there because he can cover and he's fast. I mean, not many people are Tyreek Hill fast, but he's football fast enough where I think he can take Tyreek Hill out of enough patterns where it makes me wonder if that long touchdown is going to be there. So I'm actually going to avoid that play altogether.
Yeah, and like I said, that's fair. And it's at 100 points even. So they kind of, the Vegas odds or the people maker odds that have it dead even that he's going to get one or not.
How about Derrick Henry? Plus, you got 102.5 total yards rushing receiving.
I think this is the one that, like how you feel about Tyreek Hill, this is how I feel about this one, where it's dead even 100. If I had to, like, life on the line, I'm taking the over, but it feels gross because there's going to be this narrative, right? And if you're on fantasy football Twitter and you talk about a running back that doesn't get at least 2 catches a game, they're going to crucify you, which is Derrick Henry and the Nick Chubb talk and things of that nature. But I think we're missing the big picture of, you add Julio Jones, that has to matter, right? Like, you add when healthy, a top 5 wide receiver to this offense that already had an ascending A.J. Brown, Ryan Tannehill. I mean, he's been accurate for a year and a half now, one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL. At some point, that's just going to be who he is. Mm-hmm. You lose your offensive coordinator, but Derrick Henry, like this, adding Julio Jones helps Derrick Henry. It in no way doesn't hurt him because Derrick Henry doesn't catch passes, right? So he's not losing anything in the passing game. If anything, it might actually help Derrick Henry if he goes out for a pass every once in a while and you got 2 deep threats down there and it's like, oh, there's Derrick Henry down there around the, line of scrimmage and there's no one near him because you got 2 guys covering AJ Brown and 2 guys covering Julio. So it basically comes down to, do you think he's going to catch 1 pass for 20 yards, like a random screenplay? And if you think he is, take the over. And that's kind of where I'm at. I took the over on this, but I don't feel great about it.
I actually feel pretty good about it, and here's why. The Cardinals don't have the ponies to cover AJ Brown and Julio. They just don't. They're going to have to drop Isaiah Simmons, their backer, like into the deep third, and then they're going to have to try and double the perimeter. So if you're going to sit there with Byron Murphy and a safety over the top of AJ Brown, and you're going to put Logan Ryan and another safety over the top of Julio, and then you're going to drop into basically the deep third, you're going to have Isaiah Simmons falling back because of his speed and athleticism. You're really softening that box all of a sudden. Now you're asking rookie Zaven Collins and you're asking J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones, who, Chandler Jones is a pass rusher, right? Like, he's not necessarily that guy that's going to be a stud in the run game here. To bow up on a really good Titans O-line and stop Derrick Henry. And we've seen that doesn't really work. If you've got fewer than 8 in the box, like, good luck.
Yeah. That's what makes it so, like, funny that I understand it's very difficult for Derrick Henry to finish as a top 5 guy, right? 2,000 rushing yards, like 18 touchdowns, all these things. But, like, you have, like, adding Julio Jones, like, in no way hurts him. Like, it only helps him because he's going to be more efficient. So if he has 200 less yards and he has, 30 less carries, there's a good chance his, like, yards per carry goes up by, like, 0.3, which completely offsets everything.
Sure.
Well, that one's pretty close for me. What do you think about Stefon Diggs, 7.5 receptions? The under is favored. They're playing Pittsburgh. We know how great that Pittsburgh defense is. We know how, the Josh Allen, Stefon Diggs experience was phenomenal last year. They don't seem to have a running game. They could have to rely on this passing game a lot. Like, what is your take on that with the under being 95 and the over being 105?
I think the 7.5 number might scare enough people off that I'm going to take the over. And I'm going to take the over because I do expect this one to put some points on the board. It does have a pretty high implied total. And if you've got Josh Allen going for, say, 23, 24 completions, it's not unreasonable to expect 8 or 9 of those to still be Steph Diggs. It's hard for me to imagine Emmanuel Sanders, Dawson Knox, Cole Beasley, Devin Singletary to combine for more than 12 or 13 catches. Right. So if he's floating around 24-ish completions, 8, 9 of those could very easily be Diggs.
Yeah. And so that actually leads to, like, another prop that I'm kind of avoiding because I don't know what to do. Josh Allen, 24.5 total completions. The over is favored at 24.5 completions versus Pittsburgh, but the under is 120 points. So it's kind of, it's kind of a thing that if you think the Buffalo Bills are going to score a lot early and their defense improved from last year, and you think they're going to run the clock out a little bit, like this could be a massive swing for you. That's probably going to be an outlier one, but I'm not taking the prop bet personally.
It's almost like a hedge play if you take the under here. So if you take the under, let's just say he hits at 24, that's still under because the line's 24.5, right? So if he hits 24, and Steph Diggs only gets to 7 receptions, which doesn't seem quite right to me because 24 completions means that he probably threw it about 30 some odd times, call it 30-ish times. It seems unlikely that game is close and the Bills are able to run it out. It seems like Pittsburgh was able to play and suddenly things got a little out of control. I might be okay with just running 24 completions, assuming that it's 30-something attempts, because that would be right in line with a Josh Allen, stat line. And that still gives Steph Diggs his touches, still gets the running backs their touches. Everyone still has their touches. Now, people are going to get scared by it and probably stay away from it. But that 120-point total is way too enticing for me. And I'm going to sit right there because even if it's under and he hits, say, 22 or 23 and Steph Diggs misses, say hits 6 or 7, I still got that 120-point pop to offset my 105-point Steph Diggs miss.
Yeah. Well, just so you have the stats for last year, just to make it easier on you, he had 4 games at 24 completions because, of course, he did, and then had another 4 games. So 8 games last year, he hit the under, which is, it's almost dead even. So it's going to be a close bet. But yeah, talking about hedging and people may be scared away by it. And that's how you end up winning these contests, by being able to kind of double down on the perceived idea of what people think is going to happen. And you just kind of do the opposite, right? And that's where you can kind of make up some points and help win, $20,000. Is there any other ones that you're looking at? I know you kind of mentioned Alba Kamara. The under is actually favored at 71.5 rushing yards versus Green Bay. I know you talked earlier about how he torched them last year. Do you think this is one that people are going to be kind of scared of? Much about the idea of like, well, is it Jameis? Is it Taysom Hill? There's no Michael Thomas. This team's going to look bad. They do have a really high over-under. They're top 4 in the over-unders for the weeks. And so, Kamara, do you think, like we talked about Christian McCaffrey, are we going to see more in the passing game, and do you think he can hit that rushing total? 115 points if he hits the over.
I kind of feel like this might be the McCaffrey thing. It's so tough because we don't know who's playing quarterback, and they're playing Green Bay, and Green Bay is going to get points, right?
Yeah.
Green Bay is going to probably score 30 in this game. And if Green Bay's putting up 4 touchdowns, and that means the Saints need to keep pace, they're probably having to throw it a lot. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to sit on the Kamara one. I'm not going to not play it, but I want to make it one of the last plays. I want to really drill down every other play first and then maybe circle back to it, simply because I may want to take that 115 over and swing for the fence.
Yeah, I said, and if you match that with the Josh Allen under and the Stefon Diggs over, if you're able to kind of hit those 3 and you play it pretty safe with the other bets on the week, there's a good chance you're going to win, a decent amount of money and at least get your money back, because those are going to be the difference makers.
Right.
Any other ones you want to discuss?
Yeah, actually, I want to take 2 more quarterback ones. So these are 2 of the biggest differentials. So the biggest difference between over and under total points awarded. Jared Goff interceptions, 0.5 is the line. So if he throws a pick, you get 75 points. If he doesn't throw a pick, you can get 125 if you took the under. A part of me wants to say, well, the 49ers defense is really good and Detroit's offense is really bad. It's got to be an interception. Take the over and take the skinny points and be done. But the other part of me says the Detroit Lions are going to run until they can't run anymore, and Jared Goff may only attempt 22 passes. And he's good enough at taking care of the football, and he's a competent veteran quarterback who doesn't really turn the ball over a whole heck of a lot. Like, I almost wonder if this is something where it's a trap, because his stat line's going to be something like, 205 yards passing with a touchdown and no interceptions. Where he's not fantasy viable. He's not a guy you want on your team, but he's a guy that doesn't get picked off.
Yeah, I think you being a 49ers fan, I think it really just depends on how you view this defense, right? And so for me,
Really
I
bad
think,
secondary. The secondary is putrid.
yeah,
So,
for me, I think this defense bounces back now that you kind of have, Bosa coming back off of his injury last year. The team, I think, with the offense healthy, obviously that does help the defense. I think there's going to be an ability to put some more pressure. I expect the Lions to get run over by this 49ers offense. There's just so much talent there. And I think Jimmy Garoppolo, we can both agree, is a very competent quarterback. Trey Lance is the future, but I mean, the guy can hold his own and made it to a Super Bowl for a reason.
right.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, if he only throws it, if you told me he only threw the ball 25 times, there's a really good chance he didn't throw an interception because he's going to be playing it safe. Hawkinson's a very secure guy. He's going to be having to dump it off to Swift and Jamal Williams. So,
yeah, if he throws a pick, it'll be to somebody like Fred Warner or Dre Greenlaw. It'll be on an underneath route. Maybe it's a tipped ball or something. But I think I'm actually going to take the under. At first, I was like, this isn't even playable. But the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm like, I don't know that he's going to throw it that much. I just feel like they'll be really conservative. They're going to try and just keep the 49ers offense off the field and do their best just to keep moving chains and build confidence. So I'm going to take the under simply just to swing for the fences. Give me that 125-point bang if we hit it, because that's the most points you can get on any of the props, 125 points. So if I can get a max landing on something like that and nobody else is playing it, then it gives me a defined advantage because I don't think anybody's playing the 125-point Odell Beckham 8.5 reception over. And then the other 125-point matchup is the one I want to talk about next, Patrick Mahomes. 2.5 is the line for combined passing touchdowns and interceptions. The over is at 75 points. The under is at 125.
yeah, that's and yes, Max, I can see your comment. We can read the chat. Yeah, like that one is enticing because it's kind of the situation we talked about earlier where it's like we talked about like these high over-unders. Like, in what way is it possible for Mahomes to not hit the over on 2.5? Because there's going to be a lot of points scored. When they get down to the red zone, they tried last year to make Clyde the guy, and he just could not punch it in. So towards the end of the year, they started doing those tight end loops around. They figured out ways to get in the end zone without running the ball. And then you talk about like that Browns defense is pretty good. Like I wouldn't be surprised. Mahomes is an aggressive quarterback. He's gotten lucky, I feel like, the last few years. Those could easily be picked passes. And so, he could have a game where he has 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and they still win the game and hit the over. But yeah, 125 points for that under. No one's playing that. Like,
right.
I guarantee you, if you did the percentage, it's definitely under 10% that they took the under.
So where else can you swing for the fences, right? It's like, okay, well, you can get a 120-80 split on Dalvin Cooks for rushing touchdowns. Yeah, if you take the under, you're getting 120. The line's 0.5. Do we think Dalvin Cook can get a touchdown in week 1? Probably.
Against Cincinnati, 100%.
Yeah. So hate that staying away. You've got Justin Herbert, 115-85 spread, 1.5 over under on passing touchdowns. So do we think Justin Herbert can get 2 passing touchdowns?
Pretty likely. I think that's something, we're a little newer to, Thrive. I played it a lot last year, and I know you did too. But there's a lot of strategy to still be explored. And it's something that kind of like you're kind of expanding on here. That Dalvin Cook over for 80 points is just not worth playing because everyone's going to take it. It's like it's like the free square and bingo in the middle. And so why would you sacrifice, those 20, 25, 30 points for taking Dalvin Cook where it's going to hit, but you're just going to break even with basically like 65, 70% of the player pool. You need those defense makers. And so you were kind of talking about it. I just kind of wanted to really hammer in that info right there for the listeners that, there's a reason why we're not talking about the Dalvin Cook over, because I think we both agree that there's like a 90% chance that's going to hit. That offense runs through Dalvin Cook. So.
Right. And you can get all of these, right? Like you can say hit all these overs and you can hit all your bets, but if they're all low point bets, then you're never going to cash. So you've got to be able to blend in those high point bets and figure out which of these props is going to land for you in a way where you're going to put up some big time points. That's why I want to swing for the fences on the Jared Goff thing. It felt like to me of all of the big spread, like the 50-point differential from over and under in terms of those points, that's the one that has the best chance to land. So, if I'm taking that 125 and the rest of the field is not even playing it, I have a defined advantage over any one of their other props that they play.
Yeah, because initially I was like, oh yeah, like Dalvin Cook, like that's an easy 80 points. Like, why not? But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, oh, well, everyone's going to play that, and it's only 80 points. like 80 points isn't going to win me unless I'm taking like the Patrick Mahomes under and it hits. Like otherwise, that's not going to win me anything. So there's no sense in being super aggressive on one side, but then taking the most conservative prop on the other.
Right, exactly. That's not helping you there. So, I mean, we've got 7 really good ones that we feel good about. I think what we ought to do is maybe next week we dig in a little further because we have a couple weeks here to dig in on week 1, and we can kind of figure out these props. And maybe in the lead into week 1, we'll go through the actual picks that we like a lot, and we'll go ahead and set our lineups. But I know we were going to try and talk a little about DraftKings. We're kind of running out of time today. Should we cover DK next week? Talk a little DraftKings strategy next week, or do you want to try and squeeze something in right now?
We can kind of just talk about the overall kind of strategy, but we don't have to like kind of break it down. So something that we've been talking about today that I'll kind of go first that we've been discussing, and you've really kind of taught me this over the last few weeks, that you need to shrink the player pool, right? Like if you go through and you look at DraftKings week 1 Millie Maker, right? It's a $5 buy-in. It's the massive tournament pool. First place gets $1 million. There's 13 games to choose from. That's 13 quarterbacks. That's, roughly 20-ish capable running backs. Some teams have 2 to 3 wide receivers. So you're talking about a massive player pool. Like, how am I supposed to break down all these players? If you wanted to go through and you can randomly just put players in if you want, but let's look at what helps make your team win. And it's touchdowns, right? So you want to go for those games that have the highest over-unders. And something we're also going to be talking about next week is I think we are undervaluing I think we overvalue a little bit the running quarterbacks when there's that 300 pass bonus for those extra 3 points.
Get those yards. I love Matt Ryan all the time. I always love Matt Ryan in DFS because he's always getting me 3 bills.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's something that's a little bit undervalued. Like, yeah, Jalen Hurts ran for, 70 yards, but he only had 195 passing yards. He only had 2 total touchdowns. Matt Ryan, on the other hand, threw for 330. Got that extra 3-point bonus, and he had 3 passing touchdowns. So that kind of offsets, and he was about $1,100 cheaper, right? Where you're able to kind of put him in your lineup. So that's something I think that we need to talk about a little bit more going into next week is shrinking that player pool, try to minimize which games we're picking, and then talk about the bonuses.
Cool. I can dig it. Well, too, we've got a few minutes left here. We got Max has been in the chat here. He's got a 10-team PPR league. I'm going to go ahead and post his team up here. He asked us to give it a look. See if I can show this on the screen here. So he's picked up Dak Prescott, Derrick Henry, Ezekiel Elliott, Steph Diggs, Deontay Johnson, Logan Thomas, Robbie Anderson, Devonta Smith, I assume from Philly, Travis Etienne, Kenyon Drake, Rojo, Jalen Waddle, who I love, little man crush there, Jamison Crowder, David Johnson, Michael Thomas. So he picked up Crowder and Johnson for depth. Yeah, and that was from, I guess, trading for Henry. He had made some trades here. How do you feel about this team? Is this championship worthy?
It's close because you have, at least for this year, you have Derrick Henry and Zeke, who are probably going to be, top 6 running backs, at least top 8 at the very minimum, even in PPR. They'll be contending for top 6. Diggs will be, top 4. He'll be contending for number 1 wide receiver. I think Deontay is good for PPR because I think he for some reason, like Big Ben just like the first few weeks last year, like Big Ben just hyper targeted Deontay. Like the guy was getting like 10 to 13 targets. It felt like every single week. Now he had some drop problems, but I think statistics have shown that that's not really a sticky stat for the most part. Like players kind of overcome drops. I'm a big fan of Robbie Anderson this year, although I need him to be healthy or he's going to lose his job to Terrace Marshall.
Terrace looked real good.
Oh, I love Marshall, man. I have him on like, if I had any rookie pick this year, I had Terrace Marshall. But I will say I'm drafting Robbie Anderson in like the 9th round, I think is where he's kind of going, 8th, 9th round. He's just such a good complementary wide receiver for your team, especially in the flex spot. I do agree with your statement here, Max. Zeke's underrated. Like, yeah, like he looks like he's in the best shape. He lost like 10 pounds, I think is what he said, 8 to 10 pounds. Like, I think he looks like a quality top tier running back this year, especially with like Barkley coming off his injury. Like That's going to move him up another spot. You're looking at like Kamara. Like we hope that Kamara has a good year, but like the quarterback situation could really plunder him. So that's another spot. I mean, so if Zeke was top 3, I'm not surprised. Like if he ended up at top 3 this year, because the touchdowns are going to happen. But it looks like he may need to kind of figure out that running back to the depth. Well, Etienne is a good PPR player for this year. Kenyon Drake will have some catches, but I think Josh Jacobs is still going to be the focus. I don't want to have to rely on Rojo too much. And then David Johnson, we kind of skipped over that in the notes, but that Texans backfield is a freaking mess. It's so bad.
Yeah.
I think they either played last night or the night before, but like Mark Ingram was like with the first team. Phillip Lindsay's getting like first and second downs, and David Johnson is strictly like the third down running back. Like it is the weirdest plethora of like running back carousel. I want nothing to do with that backfield.
I'm staying away from Houston completely. Yeah. But so here's the thing. I like this team quite a bit. I love Dak because he had immediate exposure to Lamb, Cooper, Gallup, and I think there's really nothing wrong with that. And anytime you're getting access to potentially 3 top 26 wide receivers, like that's a pretty good deal. And then, Henry is Henry, right? Now in PPR, he's not giving you much in the passing game, but Zeke will probably still get you 60-something targets. And Henry will still run for 1,700 yards or so. Like, you're still going to have 2 studs there at running back. Diggs is a bona fide number 1. I mean, he could have 8-9 catches a game. Like, he's just bananas. His chemistry with Josh Allen, second to none. My question here, though, is where it really comes in for me is what's happening at that wide receiver 2 and 3 slot. So I don't trust Deontay Johnson personally, and it has nothing to do with the player. I think the player is fine. I just don't know if Ben's going to hold up. Like, he has moments where he looks really good, and then they have moments where you see on social media, they're like, Ben's got a cannon, but the ball is fluttered.
That ball kind of fluttered.
Yeah. I was like, I could have thrown it on more of the line than that.
Oh, man, that was funny. Yeah.
But I think what we're going to see is Jalen Waddle emerge, and he'll probably end up being the number 2 on this roster unless we actually get Michael Thomas back. My concern with Thomas, and I would hold him, sit him on the end of the bench and just sit on him until he's healthy, is that he might be so deep in Sean Payton's doghouse, we may not get him this year. Yeah, this might be a situation where they just plant his butt on the bench and say, you know what, we're done, we're moving you. We're not putting you out there so you can get hurt again. We're going to, especially if they're not a good football team, right? If they're sub 500, I don't even know if they trot him back out there.
Yeah, well, to Max's credit, he kind of said down here at the bottom, like he fell to the 14th round. And in the 14th round, like you're swinging for the fences. Like I said, I probably wouldn't take him in the 10th. In the 14th, like sure, throw him on your IR spot if you have available. Pick up some random, player that could have some potential week 1. But yeah, like I said, like I think the top 2 running backs are good. Like the core of your team with Dak, Zeke, Diggs, and Henry, that's what's going to carry you.
Yep.
And I think Waddle's going to give you some good games. Devonta Smith is going to be very boom bust. I think of like Tyreek Hill, like early in his career, he'll have like one big game with a touchdown, and then he'll have like 3 catches for 30 yards. But I think he still provides some good fantasy games. Yeah, I would just, like I said, I would look for that. See if you can make some trades, Max, and see if you can kind of hammer out that running back 3. I do like Etienne a lot, but if you can put some combination of like Devonta and Kenyon Drake together and see if you can upgrade a little bit, something a little more secure, I would probably go about that because I don't think David Johnson is going to be very useful for your team this year. But it's solid for sure. You're definitely contending.
Cool. Max, if you have any other questions, hit us up, let us know. But it is about that time. So if you are on Fantasy Football Twitter, you may or may not have noticed some craziness that broke out and the typical drama that happens. All I'm going to leave everybody with is no matter what's going on, no matter what people are saying, whether or not they're agreeing or disagreeing with you, whatever that might look like, just remember, be excellent to each other. Not everyone's going to agree with you, and it doesn't matter. If they don't agree with you, it's their prerogative. It doesn't matter. You don't have to fight them. You don't have to engage them. Let it go because, life's too short and there's way too much animosity out there and it never ends well for anybody. So I think with that, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. Max, thoughts on Logan Thomas? It's not Logan Thomas. It is Ryan Fitzpatrick, and he absolutely hates tight ends. I don't know why. It's not that we dislike the player. I'm not crazy about the situation. If you can manage to turn Logan Thomas into Irv Smith, it'll help you tremendously. With that, I'm Jeff DiMatteo of Gridiron Ratings. With me, as always, my man, Kyle Carroll. Kyle, say something witty and clever to send us out.
Don't tank your fantasy drafts. Be prepared.
Be prepared. Max, thanks for your questions. You take care. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Yep. See you guys.